Christie Max Williams, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the kickoff program of the 21st year of the Arts Cafe Mystic. During our tenure of presenting programs featuring the nation's most celebrated poets and writers, complemented by New England's finest musicians, the Iron Curtain fell on the communist bloc. These United States elected an African American as president, and gay men and women in our fair state won the right to marry. Yes. To use the grand metaphor, the flapping of the butterfly wings of the Arts Cafe continue to change the world. There's another metaphor that I like to use pertaining to the Arts Cafe. It comes by way of the great French poet Paul Celan. Stay with me here. Paul Celan likened a poem to a message in a bottle thrown into the sea in the not always greatly hopeful belief that somewhere and sometime it could wash up on land, on heartland, perhaps. Isn't that nice? I like to think of the Arts Cafe as that land, that heartland. And I like to think of you, our audience, stopping along the beach to reach down for that bottle. Curious, you open it, and something happens. We ordinarily think of art and literature, poems, as something that happened to us. We read it, and it is good. We're somehow changed by the experience. But suppose that we as readers or as listeners make something happen to the poem. The philosopher Berkeley, you all remember your Berkeley. He maintained that the taste of the apple lies in the contact with the palate and not in the thing itself. In a similar way, the great Argentine writer Jorge Luis Borges asserted that poetry lies not in the meeting of the poem and the reader, not in the lines and the symbols printed on the pages of the book, but in the experience of the reader. For us as readers and listeners, this is a flattering idea, but it's also true. A poem only exists when we uncork the bottle and engage it. That's why the Arts Cafe exists. So without more ado, let's pop the cork on this show. Our opening voice tonight is the poet Anna Coit, Anna N. Coit, I should say, who currently lives here among us in Mystic. This summer, Ms. Coit served as Grand Marshal of the parade for the Battle of Stonington's bicentennial, which is remarkable enough, but made more remarkable because as a girl, she attended the parade's first centennial in 1914. Ms. Coit was born in New York City, is a graduate of Vassar, and has been writing poems for more than 75 years. As a young woman, she was a writer, then an editor at Time magazine, at a juncture when all of the bylines, without exception, were those of men, and where she wrote under her byline the cover story about the breakthrough of penicillin. I might add that for a part of her tenure at Time, she shared an office with a photographer named Walker Evans. For the past 30 years, Ms. Coit has written the historical notes for the North Stonington Historical Society, which she helped to found. Indeed, she lived in North Stonington for 60 years on a farm where she established a prosperous Christmas tree business. Indeed, she has been an outspoken and effective advocate for right-to-farm legislation here in Connecticut. You might be interested to know that she is an enthusiastic birder, was involved in the formation of the Nature Conservancy. You might like to know that she disdains television. And she, too, wrote an unpublished novel which she has described as really rotten. But our attention tonight is focused on Ms. Coit's poems. She recently published her debut volume, the Islesboro Poems, and has a second collection well in hand. But we invite you to see for yourself as you join me in welcoming Anna N. Coit.
I guess it'll work.
Let's try that.
Is that all right? Siblings. I miss my siblings even now that they are long gone. Do spirits hover, or is it only in my mind that my family exists and I'm puzzled by the single children and the families which burst apart, never to return or care? I am not perfect. My siblings were not, but we were like white houses, visible. No matter how wide the sea, visible. Arguing in blue. I don't feel like making a poem today. I feel like arguing. Come out of the woods, my darling. I want to argue with you. Oh, there you are, all blue and beautiful. Here's the blue pot. Can you do my back? Now we are like the early Britons. Our ancestors who ran around in blue. We can argue about lawns. We can argue about diet. We can argue about mulch. No, I think it's better to stir the soil every day. We can argue about people who don't know how to behave. Critical. You call me critical after all that fuss about training children. Knives to play with? Certainly not, even though you made them so beautifully. Learn by doing, you say. But they will cut themselves. What do you mean? That's the idea. Can't we just tell them? And about tattoos. I like you, love you, just the way you are. Wash you off, and you're exactly the original design of a beautiful man. No, a handful of the points of a starfish on your shoulder would mar you. You think a starfish has a handful Just one? No, it only has a handful. I'm not wrong, you are. We must go out on the beach and see how many points a starfish has and wash off the blue paint. I don't feel like arguing anymore. Insomnia. When night comes, I mount the tip of a too-high springboard and stand there wondering which way I'll fall. Will I fall on the good side with blessed sleep and blameless dreams, or into a doze which lasts all night, reviewing the failures of the day, of my life as well. I wonder that I've lived so long with my work only begun. The engine. On the train going home, I discovered I was next to a steam engine only about a yard away. It had a black iron body, a brass bell on top, an array of brass rivets for decor. Hardly had I finished admiring this gorgeous monster when we started together. Everything on that engine had a rhythm of its own. The smokestack up front emitted black smoke in fours. Chuff, 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 chuff. A bell clanged evenly. The fireman shoveled. And best of all, the cylinder next to me was going pitch-tush, pitch-tush, as it drove the wheels with a shiny rod. Out front, the cowcatcher was eating the ties. St. George slew a dragon. I think it was something like this. Black smoke, chuffing, hissing. I looked around for someone to cheer my dragon, but the passengers were all reading the World Telegram. The Tempest. Suddenly, late in the afternoon, a black cloud appears in the northwest, a cloud we had not noticed before. The leaves on the walnut trees turn upward, exposing their light undersides. The cloud is growing, spreading, collecting all the air around into a great tower, 10,000 feet tall at least, and speaking in lightning and thunder. Diana hides under a stone. The birds cling tight to their nests. The serpents go into their holes. Rats go wherever rats go. All at once, our softest element, the air, has become the harshest. A detachment of it with a roar and a rush with a roar and a rush bends the grove of oaks we did not know would bend, and strips the apple blossoms away. Groton, armed with thunderbolts, takes his place on a cloud, and Thor, rolling thunderbolts, helps him. Valkyries sweep across the plain, flattening grass and reeds as they go. Jesse James and Winston Churchill are close behind, followed more slowly by Jacqueline Kennedy and General Lee on Traveler. High in the blaze of flickering lightning, Pegasus flies, and we can see Bellerophon falling. Halfway up, we see Nebuchadnezzar opening the door of the fiery furnace, calling, "Shadrach!" All about comes rain, almost solid, and pellets of ice boosted up again and again in the yard, and they fall into our yard. When they were ready, the balls and in our yard. The great hand of Zeus rubs our landscape one way or the other. Jove's lightning in all its fearfulness lights everything. The gods get together and do all the thunder and rain they can at once. Stygian blackness descends like the cloak of the highwayman in a fairy tale. Our terror increases. The lightning, with a roar, tears a ditch in the yard all the way to the cellar and sets fire to a distant oak. By mirage, we see Rip Van Winkle in clouds over the Catskills, and waterspouts hitting Block Island. Cotantawet, our closest god, keeps his hand on the turtle that is the beginning of everything. Jove begins to kick up the edges of the cloud with his feet, edging it toward westerly as he does so, and a fine double rainbow forms and covers one half of the sky. We are left to admire 3 inches of hail in our yard and to recover our senses after this spectacle. I'm no angel, but I do my best to keep an agreeable atmosphere while I got charming scented cloak about me. But then you come along and ruin my equanimity just about every day. You jump to your own conclusions and call them mine. Spray me with chloride of lime. Tell people I don't like squash, and give me a book I've no intention of reading. Tell me your ideas, please. Your own ideas, not the ones you have guessed I have. That's the end.
I'm pleased to announce that we have Anna's debut volume, The Islesboro Poems, on sale tonight. As always, all proceeds go to the author. That gives me a chance to thank our friends at Bank Square Books for their support. Mystic is lucky to have so hip and friendly an independent bookstore. I also want to thank the Mystic Arts Center for welcoming the Arts Café again. Our community is fortunate to have such a resource, and we are lucky to feel at home here. So, on with the show. Now for something completely different. The Arts Café has presented just about every kind of music you can think of, from rock, folk, and jazz to classical and opera. And we take pride in our musically adventurous audience. But tonight's musical presentation defies genre, even as it defines delight. Indeed, Nora Fox and Ethan Philbrick are simply a sui generis of inspired music making. Both these young people also embody the local kid makes good story, and both are carrying it several original steps further. Stonington girl Nora Fox, her singing and dancing has carried her to the Goodspeed Opera, Madison Square Garden, and all the way to Broadway. Now based in New York, Ms. Fox commands a repertoire spanning American standards, folk pop, show tunes, and opera with an ease and personal grace that make every song her own. Hailing from Providence, Mr. Philbrick is an accomplished cellist, indeed a doctoral student in performance studies at NYU. Mr. Philbrick has led participatory projects in Cincinnati and taken part in cultural diplomacy projects in Pakistan, Mali, Panama, and Guatemala. But as you will hear, their background notes give little insight into the adventurous music they make together. So let's get on with it and welcome Nora Fox and Ethan Philbrick.
And the sweet silver song of a lark. Walk on through the wind, walk on through the rain, though your dreams be tossed and blown. Walk on, with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone. You'll never walk alone.
We're Fox and the Hare. Fox because it's my middle name, and he's got a hairy chest. And
You're a good audience. I'll show you how.
well, the next song we have for you is "I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free."
And this is a song written in 1963. It's a freedom song from the Civil Rights Movement, written by, oh my God, his name's
Dick Dallas and Billy Taylor.
Billy Taylor. Billy Taylor is the pianist who originally wrote it. And it was written in 1963, and then the recording that made it famous was 1967, Nina Simone singing it. And it might seem a little strange that a half-Jewish white girl from Stonington and a waspy boy from Nantucket are going to sing a freedom song here at the Mystic Center for the Arts, but we sing it with the spirit of Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail that was written just 6 months before the song was written in 1963. That goes, the most famous probably quote from it, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." And so in a world rife with injustice, we offer this song, Billy Taylor, "I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free." Thanks, everybody. This next one, we're now going to go into a series of originals. The first one is going to be one of mine. It's a song pretty recent this summer, and I've been writing some songs where I take poems by some of my favorite poets and create a song it started just because I wanted to memorize more poems, and I decided songs was a good way. And so this is a poem called Chandelier by C.P. Cavafy. In a small and empty room with 4 lone walls, covered in a cloth of solid green, a chandelier that burns and glows with every flame a fever, a need. In a small and empty room with 4 lone walls, covered in a cloth of solid green, a chandelier that burns and glows with every flame a fever, a need. And in this small room that is set aglow, this light is no ordinary light. And in this small room that is set aglow, this light is no ordinary light. The pleasure of this heat has not been fashioned for bodies that too easily take flight. The pleasure of this heat has not been fashioned for bodies that too easily take flight. In a small and empty room with 4 lone walls, covered in a cloth of solid green, a chandelier that burns and glows with every flame a fever, a need.
Okay, this next song I wrote last summer in response to the killing of Trayvon Martin. It's written from the perspective of somebody who was very close to him.
Forget where we were going, but know that we belong. See, I was wishing to take you everywhere, but when I turned around, no one was there. I'll hold you gently, as God only knows. Please forgive them. Why do you have to go? It isn't every day we close another door. Have we come this far? Don't wanna fight like this no more. It's broken every limb of this body I'm in. I don't wanna think and feel, but to hold you. I know we've all been wrong, but this war isn't done. Could we try again, lest we lose another friend? I know we've all been wrong, but this war isn't done. Could we try again, lest we lose another friend? Don't wanna lose another friend, lest we get up, get up, get up.
Thank you. Just should recognize a little lyrical contribution to that song from a local budding poet herself, Amelia Golden. Right there.
All right, this next one's from the same project of taking poems by poets I love. So this is an Elizabeth Bishop poem, a very famous Elizabeth Bishop poem called One Art. Something every day. Practice losing farther, faster. And places, names where you stay. Lost through cities, rivers faster. The art of losing's not so hard to master, though it may feel like it brings disaster. The art of losing's not so hard to master, though it may feel like it brings disaster. Even lose you. 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 Even lose you.
you.
Jonathan Philbrick, everybody.
Nora Fox, everybody.
I'm wild again, beguiled again, a simpering, whimpering child again, bewitched, bothered, and bewildered am I. Couldn't sleep and wouldn't sleep till love came and told me I shouldn't sleep. Bewitched, bothered, and bewildered am I. Lost my heart, so what of it? He was cold, I agree. He can laugh, but I love it. Although the laugh's on me, I'll cling to him each spring, to him, and long for the day that I'll sing to him. I am bewitched, bothered, so bewildered am
Thank you. We just got one more song for you guys. Yeah, one more song.
Yeah, last song. Oh, thanks. Forget your trouble.
happy day.
Come on, get happy.
Again.
We're
The
gonna chase all those
skies
cares
above clear
away.
again.
Shout hallelujah.
So let's sing a song
And just get
of
happy.
cheer again. Happy
Get ready
days
for
are
the
here again.
The sun is shining.
All together,
Come on, get happy.
shout it now.
The Lord
There's
is
no
waiting to
who
take your
can
hand.
doubt it now.
Shout hallelujah.
So let's tell the world
Just get
about
happy.
it now. Happy
Get ready
days
for
are
the
here
judgment
again.
We're going across the river. Soon our cares will all be gone.
Be no more from now on. From now on.
Forget your troubles and just get
Are
happy.
here again.
You better
The
chase all your cares away.
again.
Shout hallelujah.
So let's tell
And just get
about it
happy.
now.
Get ready for the judgment day.
Happy days are here again. Happy days are here again.
Days are here again.
Days are here again. Happy days are here again.
Days are here
Happy
again.
days are here
Happy days are here again.
again.
in casa. Happy days are here. Happy days are here. Happy days are here. It's my pleasure to introduce the winner of this year's Pulitzer Prize for Poetry, Vijay Seshadri. With hard work and good luck, an artist may sometimes be struck by the kind of creative lightning that results in a major work, which is at once startlingly new and large, even while retaining the artist's distinctive and recognizable signature. Mr. Seshadri's Pulitzer-winning book, 3 Sections, is such a work. Mr. Seshadri's previous books, Wild Kingdom and Longmeadow, which won the James McLaughlin Award from the American Academy of Poets, established him as one of our best poets. But he became instantly famous as a result of the New Yorker's 9/11 edition. The magazine's back cover, which is customarily prime ad space, instead featured Mr. Seshadri's poem, The Disappearances. Perhaps like me, you read The Disappearance and said to yourself, who is this guy? Well, The Disappearances, which was actually not written in response to 9/11, gave promise of great things to come. A promise that 3 sections has borne out. What is special and important about the Disappearances and about the poems in 3 sections is how they convey the strangeness we all feel in experiencing day-to-day life, the change and loss we all contend with, while also sensing, however vaguely, that we're living in history. These are decidedly not autobiographical poems. They don't plumb or exploit the poet's personal life. But don't be alarmed, because in Mr. Seshadri's casual and colloquial voice, these poems are readily accessible, slyly funny, deliciously provocative. They make us think along with the writer. They change and grow us as readers, listeners. Mr. Seshadri was born in Bangalore, India, and was 5 years old when his family immigrated to the U.S. He grew up in Ohio, which confirms that we all have to be from somewhere. After graduation from college, he worked for several years in the fishing and logging industries in the Pacific Northwest, an adventure that provides the stuff of his remarkable prose poem, Pacific Fishes in Canada. Imagine a poem called Pacific Fishes in Canada. Then he gravitated to New York City, bouncing around graduate school, working in the copy editing department of the New Yorker while honing his art. In a recent interview, Mr. Seshadri said, "I think that what happens as one's poetry grows and changes is that the demands one makes on poems are greater." Well, I invite you to see for yourself as you join me in welcoming Vijay Seshadri.
Thank you, Christie, and thank you especially for inviting me here to be a part of this program with Ethan and Nora and the incredible Anna Coit. Just amazing kind of, experience to hear those poems and to sort of think about the scale of perception they represent. And to think about all the hope that instills in one for one's own work. When I'm 106, I'm really gonna go to town. I ain't seen nothing yet, boy. I'm gonna wow. And I expect you all to buy the book. So yeah. So Christie was talking about this book, which has garnered a lot of attention, and my other books feel really bad about that. They're up there on the shelf going, well, what about us, We think we're just as good, So I'm going to read some poems from 3 sections, and I'm going to read some poems from the Longmeadow, and I'm going to intersperse them. And the first is from 3 sections, and if I can find it, it's called This Morning. And the title is important because there's been, since the 60s, since, most famously Frank O'Hara and other New York school poets, an attempt to sort of write the poem of the moment that you're actually in. O'Hara's lunch poems, for example, where he goes out to lunch with someone and he comes back to his office and he writes a poem about that lunch and what he was thinking in that lunch. And this was my attempt to do that. I mean, I grew up in that milieu and I sort of repudiated those ideas for some reason. I don't know why. I guess they were too familiar to me because they were a part of my youth. But I wrote this poem with the idea, I woke up one morning and I said, well, I'm going to write a poem about this morning. And the process of the morning is going to constitute the substance of the poem. And this morning, first I had 3 apocalyptic visions, each more terrible than the last. The graves open and the sea rises to kill us all. And then the doorbell rang and I went downstairs and signed for 2 packages. One just an envelope, but the other long and bulky, difficult to manage. Both from my neighbor Gus. You're never not at home, the FedEx guy said appreciatively. It's true. I don't shave or even wash. I keep the air conditioners roaring. Though it's summer, one of the beautiful red and conifer green Bayside fuel oil trucks that bed down in the depot by the canal was refreshing the subsurface tanks with black drafts wrung from the rock, blood of the rock sucked up from the crevices. The driver looked unconcerned. Leaning slightly on each other, Frank and Louise stepped over his hose and walked by slowly on the way to their cardiologist. That poem and this one, they have a lot of verisimilitude to them, but I want to tell everybody that all of the details are actually made up. I feel like I have to confess that, especially with this poem, Memoir, because this poem is called Memoir, and there's a woman in it, and you will recognize it when you read the poem, when you hear the poem. And I went to a party soon after this poem was written, and this woman I had worked with came up to me at the party, and she said, Vijay, am I the blonde in that poem? And I said, of course you are, Meredith. Her name was Meredith. And this is the poem, and You know, like I was frustrated because I was trying to write a memoir and I couldn't do it, so I decided to write this poem. Memoir. Orwell says somewhere that no one ever writes the real story of their life. The real story of a life is the story of its humiliations. If I wrote that story now, radioactive to the end of time, people, I swear, your eyes would fall out. You couldn't peel the gloves fast enough from your hands scorched by the firestorms of that shame. Your poor hands, your poor eyes, to see me weeping in my room or boring the tall blonde to death. Once I accused the innocent. Once I bowed and prayed to the guilty. I still wince at what I once said to the devastated widow. And one October afternoon, under a locust tree whose blackened pods were falling and making illuminating patterns on the pathway, I was seized by joy, and someone saw me there. And that was the worst of all, lacerating and unforgettable. Oh, thank you. Thanks. I can't believe she said that to me. Am I the blonde in that poem? It's like, I didn't even really know her that well, you know. I must have bored her to death at some point, at some party. You know? It's like, get away from this guy, you know. It's... Anyway. This poem is called Surveillance Report. And, you know, long before Edward Snowden, I was on top of this phenomenon, you know. And I wrote this poem, you know, I had an idea for this poem a long time ago, and then I wrote it well before his, you know, he had to fly to Russia, you know. Surveillance report. The omnidirectional mic and the video camera, both tiny, hidden in the bonsai cypress, are picking up my sunrise self-help talk show in the makeshift kitchen studio in a bathrobe and bunny slippers. First, the opening monologue. Then the body banters with the mind. Then cue up the callers. Caller X is unhappy with the latest dream interpretation. Caller X is cut off with a flick of the wrist. Caller Y wants to share that my fearless candor has given her permission to become utterly transparent herself. Thank you, Caller Y. Your inner light can be seen from here. Night visiting revenants, clerks of the underworld, gnawing the half-buried roots of being, spirits of the burning trees, kiss me goodbye. The tape shows me checking my chronometer and exiting for work. Observers posted along my morning commute observe the usual detours, the purchase of potables and comestibles. Flash forward the digital feed. At 10:00 hours, the current workplace asset texts, subject agitated, begging colleagues, please have the courtesy not to be conscious of me. Of the 3 or 4 scenarios employed to predict my next location during the interminable lunch hour, when the terrible question of where to go and what to eat, among choices once enticing but now exposed in all their bitter banality, assault even the most cheerful of our targets, today, which is a Tuesday, is Burning House Scenario Day. Cloud after cloud of smoke and flames sweeps through and over the turrets, the Widow's Walk, the pergolas, the porte cochere. Fire boiling through the leaded window panes immolates the gilly flowers. Though I haven't been located for reasons I don't understand, and the crowd shots pirated from the eyewitness news feed, what the crowd feels, I would feel if I were there to feel it. But I'm not there to feel it. I'm not there at all. There at the next disaster. The last disaster but one but one, but one. The dormant listening posts activate. Windowless vans crammed with information technology park on the corners of all the streets. Oh, the wailing in the control room, the recriminations, the pointing of fingers, the blame game, the pleas of the pragmatic to move forward, not backward, and solve this problem. Find me and put me back on the grid. Where will I be scanned for first? Maybe I'm in the trashed, padlocked public restroom in the park. The pipes are hissing. The concrete floor is littered with syringes and treacherous with pools of chill and fetid standing water. The mirrors are shattered, and the sinks and urinals are shattered. This is the restroom nobody ever visits, and the park abandoned by humankind. The dead zone, where the transducer and the infrared lens quail, where all the signals ricochet. Or, alternatively, I could be on a beach somewhere. This poem is called Guide for the Perplexed. Yeah. Which is the title of a famous work by Maimonides. But genesis of the poem is this, that I subscribe to a weekly science magazine called Science News. It's a digest of all of the kind of recent developments in science week by week. And you know, I've been subscribing to it for a good 20 years at least. And the magazines just pile up, right? And my wife is always saying, Vijay, you know, should we stop this subscription? You haven't read any of these magazines in 6 months. And, you know, I say, no. And, you know, and they pile up, and then she threatens to recycle them. So I read through all of them really quickly. And the reason I subscribe is that I've always thought I could get an idea for a poem from one of these, you know. I think somebody told me long ago that you could write these subscriptions off on your taxes if you're a poet, you know. And we poets are always looking to make, you know, a buck, especially from the federal government. And I said, okay, you know. So anyway, so they pile up, and then I read them all and let my wife recycle them. And all of these years, I have never gotten an idea from Science News, except for this one time. I read an issue of Science News that had a fact in it that was so astonishing that I had to build a poem around it, no matter what happened. And you will recognize the fact. Guide for the Perplexed. The bedroom slippers, silk linings. The dressing gown of brocade, stitched with the zodiac. The pajamas underneath, also made out of silk, for which how many individuals of the species be more I, having munched the succulent pale green mulberry leaves, and insinuated a sack wherein to magnify themselves, were steamed to death from the inside out. The delicate fibers are intact. He feels their ripeness on his skin. He listens deeply into the night, which listens back. The birch log pops in the fireplace. The fetishes brood on the mantelpiece. The ice melts in the gin. And yellower and deeper than dandelion yellow, yellower and stronger than Moroccan yellow, the color almost of a yellow marigold, is the yellow silk kimono she wears to greet the floating world. Moths on the wing clutter the starlight. Ghosts of dead moths are on the window pane and knee-deep in the ballroom, in social clubs and places of worship. They are proof, if anyone still needs proof, that awesome are the powers of humankind who have taken this self-same moth and endowed it with a gene from the jellyfish so as to produce fluorescent silk. And all in the interests of beauty. I shall spare you, by the way, my exhaustive researches into the history of the Silk Road. Thank you. I'm going to read a poem from the Longmeadow. This is a poem, I had a kid, and we were actually talking about our children at dinner, how utterly disappointing they are to us. That was a bitter dinner, a bunch of luck, empty nester parents sitting there and grumbling about their, I don't want to mischaracterize it, actually. But you know what I mean. But anyway. So anyway, when I had the kid, I thought, wow, I should write a poem about this. And then I said, well, can I really write a poem about this? And then my friend Gus said, oh, you're not going to start writing baby poems, are you, Vijay? So I said, yeah, I am. I got really mad. But I couldn't write a poem. I couldn't write a poem about it. And then... and then the Iraq War happened, and I thought, wow, this is a way to get into this poem. Strangely enough. By this time, the kid was like 14, but, But, yeah, I know. I had to wait for the war. Anyway, the poem is called Baby, Baby. Choices have been made that I had nothing to do with. Mistakes have been made, and worse than that, death has been served tea and fresh figs. I was not present in that room, at the table polished with citron oil. I did not take part in the extended discussion whereby the decision was refined. So don't point a finger at me someday. I was here by the crib looking at you, chewing your toes, blowing raspberries, blowing little thought balloons with your labials, fricatives, glottal stops and retroflexes, your mint-conditioned neurons firing. The language can't be understood, but the purpose is plain. I was here advising you that even though all the women want to stroke you and all the men want to be your pal, you should probably start developing your own resources. Popularity like that never lasts. I was saying how difficult it is to be courteous, loyal, thrifty, brave, cheerful, obedient, and wise separately, let alone all at once. I was pointing you far into the future, to the day you go down to the river and wade out knee-deep in the sacred element, and turn and see on the riverbank 7 luminous beings lined up and looking at you. To which of them will you put your question when you wade back? The Christians say, the story of the universe is the story of a boy and his dad. They are absolutely right. I can see that now, waiting here for the smiles I'd kill for, watching you as you sleep, curling your fist, which in a time I can barely recollect, did not, or maybe did exist. And now I'll read the only other baby poem I managed to write. Not only are they disappointing, they don't, generate enough poems. It's like, wow. Not only do they reject you and leave you alone. Terrible. This poem is called Trailing Clouds of Glory. And as a lot of you will recognize that that's, from Wordsworth's Immortality Ode, and his notion is that we come trailing clouds of glory, and slowly the material world closes over us, that when we're born as infants, we're just filled with, a sense of the immensity and infinity of the world. The full quotation is, trailing clouds of glory did we come from God who is our home. And, the other story, I guess I'm talking a lot about these poems, but, I've kind of, I've been reading a lot. And slowly, the talk takes over the poems, and pretty soon, it'll all be talk about the poems, and then maybe I'll read a couple of lines, So you guys are lucky, you're midway through that process, so you're actually getting to hear some poems. But anyway, the other impetus for this poem was when Arizona passed its immigration law that stipulated that if you looked like you might be undocumented, then you could be pulled over, throwing out, 800 years of Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence beginning with the Magna Carta, right? And not only did this worry me because I really love the Grand Canyon, and I felt like if I went there, they'd pull me over and ask me to show them my passport, and I didn't want that to happen. But also, it's sort of. I had another response, which was curious, which was when I was younger, I would be indignant about the assault on the Constitution that this represented, but this time I thought, wow, this is a good idea for a poem, like the Iraq War, That's a good idea for a poem, So this is the poem I got out of that, unfortunate event. I'm like a disaster tourist, going around looking for poems in places where disasters of one sort or another occur. Anyway, Trailing Clouds of Glory. Even though I'm an immigrant, the angel with the flaming sword seems fine with me. He unhooks the velvet rope. He ushers me into the club. Some activity in the mosh pit, a banquet here, a panhandler there, a gray curtain drawn down over the infinitely curving lunette. Jupiter in its crescent phase, huge, a vista of a waterfall with a rainbow in the spray, a few desultory orgies, a billboard of the snub-nosed electric car of the future. The inside is exactly the same as the outside, down to the MC in the yellow spats. So why the angel with the flaming sword, bringing in the sheep and waving away the goats? And the men with the binoculars, elbows resting on the roll bars of jeeps, peering into the desert. There is a border, but it is not fixed. It wavers, it shimmies, it rises and plunges into the unimaginable seventh dimension before erupting in a field of Dakota corn. On the F train to Manhattan yesterday, I sat across from a family threesome Guatemalan by the look of them. Delicate and archaic and Mayan, and obviously undocumented to the bone. They didn't seem anxious. The mother was laughing and squabbling with the daughter over a knockoff smartphone on which they were playing a video game together. The boy, maybe 3, disdained their ruckus. I recognized the scowl on his face, the retrospective, maskless rage of inception. He looked just like my son when my son came out of his mother after 30 hours of labor. The head squashed, the lips swollen, the skin empurpled and hideous with blood and afterbirth. Out of the inflamed tunnel, and into the cold room of harsh sounds. He looked right at me with his bleared eyes. He had a voice like Richard Burton's. He had an impressive command of the major English texts. I will do such things, what they are, yet I know not. But they shall be the terrors of the earth, he said. The child, he said, is father of the man. I think I'll... I'll read this little sequence. It's sort of inspired by Dante, but not really. You know, it's just, it's actually inspired by infernal ideas, but then I realized Dante had those, so I had to give him credit, and then it just developed out of there, And the first poem is called, guess what? Hell. You'd have to be as crazy as Dante to get those down. The infernal hatreds. Shoot them where they live, and then skip town. Or stay and re-engineer the decrepit social contraption to distill the 200-proof elixir of fear and torture the what from the what. And didn't I promise under threat of self-intubation not to envision this corridor, coal tar black, that narrows down and into a shattering claustrophobia attack before opening out to the lake of frozen where the gruesome figure is discerned? Turn around, go home. Just to look at it is to become it. Purgatory, the film. He was chronically out of work, why we don't know. She was the second born of a set of estranged identical twins. They met, hooked up, and moved in with her mother, who managed a motel on Skyline Drive. But always it was the other, the firstborn, the bad twin, the runaway, he imagined in the shadow of the vacancy sign, or watching through the window below the dripping eaves, while they made love or slept. The body is relaxed and at rest. The mind is relaxed in its nest. So the self that is and is not itself rises and leaves to peek over the horizon where it sees all its psychokinetic possibilities resolving into shapely fictions. She was brave, nurturing, kind. She was evil. She was out of her mind. She was a junkie trading sex for a fix, a chief executive, an aviatrix. She was an angel to the blinded and the lamed, the less than upright, the infra-dig. And she was even a failure. She went to LA to make it big and crept back home injured and ashamed. Purgatory, the sequel. They put him in jail, why we don't know. They stamped him postponed. But he didn't mind. The screws were almost kind. He had leisure to get his muscles toned, mental space to regret his crimes. And when he wasn't fabricating license plates, he was free to remember the beauty that not once but 1,000 times escaped him forever and escapes me too. Ghosts of a mist drifting across the face of the stars. Jupiter triangulating with the crescent moon and Mars. Prismatic fracturings in a drop of dew. Heaven. There's drought on the mountain. Wildfires scour the hills. So the mammal crawls down the desiccated rills, searching for the fountain, which it finds, believe it or not, or sort of finds. A thin silver sliver rises from an underground river and makes a few of the hot rocks steam and the pebbles hiss. Soon the mammal will drink, but it has first to stop and think its reflexive, impeccable thought, that thinking comes down to this: mystery, longing, thirst. Okay. This poem is called Bright Copper Kettles. Does everyone recognize that title? Anybody who doesn't? Raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens, bright copper kettles and warm woolen mittens. I could go on, but, not after those musicians, actually. I should just stop. Bright copper kettles. Dead friends coming back to life, dead family, speaking languages living and dead, their minds retentive, their five senses intact, their footprints like a butterfly's, mercy shining from their comprehensive faces. This is one of my favorite things. I like it so much I sleep all the time. Moon by day and sun by night find me dispersed deep in the dreams where they appear, in fields of goldenrod, in the city of 5 pyramids, before the empress with the melting face, under the towering plane tree. They just show up. It's all right, they seem to say. It always was. They are diffident and polite. Who knew the dead were so polite? They don't want to scare me. Their heads don't spin like weather vanes. They don't want to steal my body and possess the earth and wreak vengeance. They're dead, you understand. They don't exist. And besides, why would they care? They're subatomic, horizontal. Think about it. One of them shyly offers me a pencil. The eyes under the eyelids dart faster and faster. Through the intercom of the house where for so long there was no music, the Right Reverend Al Green is singing, I could never see tomorrow. I was never told about the sorrow. And I think I'll read just 3 more. This one is called Thought Problem. How strange would it be if you met yourself on the street? How strange if you liked yourself, took yourself in your arms, married your own self, propagated by techniques known only to you, and then populated the world. Replicas of you are everywhere. Some are Arabs, some are Jews, some live in yurts. It is an abomination. But better that your sweet and scrupulously neat self emerges at many points on the earth to watch the horn moon rise than all those dolts out there turning into pillars of salt wherever we look. If we have to have people, let them be you. Spritzing your geraniums, driving yourself to the haberdashery, killing your supper with a blowgun. Yes, only in the forest do you feel at peace, up in the branches and down in the terrific gorges. But you've seen through everything else. You've fled in terror across the frozen lake. You found yourself in the sand, the palace, the prison, the dockside stews. And long ago, on this same planet, you came home to an empty house, poured a scotch and soda, and sat in a recliner in the unlit rumpus room, puzzled at what became of you. I'll read the last poem in the Longmeadow, which is longish, not very long, and then the last poem in 3 sections. The last poem in the Longmeadow is called The Longmeadow. Funny how that worked out. The Longmeadow. Near the end of one of the old poems, the Son of Righteousness, the source of virtue and civility, on whose back the kingdom is carried, as on the back of the tortoise the earth is carried, passes into the next world. The wood is dark, and on the other side of the wood the sea is shallow, warm, endless. In and around it there is no threat of life. So little is the atmosphere charged with possibility that he might as well be wading through a flooded basement. He wades for what seems like forever, and never stops to rest in the shade of the metal rain trees, springing out of the water at fixed intervals. Time, though endless, is also short. So he wades on until he walks out of the sea and into the mountains, where he burns on the windward slopes and freezes in the valleys. After unendurable struggles, he finally arrives at the celestial realm. The god waits there for him. The god invites him to enter. But, looking through the glowing portal, he sees on that happy plain not those he thinks wait eagerly for him, his beloved, his brothers, his companions in war and exile, all long since dead and gone, but sitting pretty and enjoying the gorgeous sunset, his cousin and bitter enemy, the cause of that war, that exile, whose arrogance and vicious indolence plunged the world into grief. The god informs him that yes, those he loved have been carried down the river of fire. Their thirst for justice offended the cosmic powers, who are jealous of justice. In their place in the celestial realm, called Alaukika in the ancient texts, the breaker of faith is now glorified. He, at least, acted in keeping with his nature. Who has not felt a little of the despair the Son of Righteousness now feels, staring wildly around him? The god watches, not without compassion and a certain wonder. This is the final illusion, the one to which all the others lead. He has to pierce through it himself without divine assistance. He will take a long time about it, with only his dog to keep him company. The mongrel dog, celebrated down the millennia, who has waited with him, shivered and burned with him, and never abandoned him to his loneliness. That dog bears a slight resemblance to my dog, a skinny, restless, needy, overprotective mutt who was rescued from a crack house by Suzanne. On weekends, and when I can shake free during the week, I take her to the Longmeadow in Prospect Park, where dogs are allowed off the leash in the early morning. She's gray-muzzled and old now, but you can't tell that by the way she runs. Thank you. And this is the last poem. It's called Light Verse, and it has a little subtitle to it, an explanation, which is Standard Time Begins, and I should explain the explanation, you know. What is it? Lord Byron and Don Juan. Coleridge is explaining metaphysics to the nation. I wish he would explain his explanation. Sort of, you know. The explanation is that the Times called me up, and, you know, like, on their Sunday op-ed page, they will have poems for specific occasions, and, you know, and someone had the brilliant idea to, you know, have poets write poems commemorating the end of daylight savings time. That was just amazing, you know. And, you know, the others were predictably, you know, of a quality that would reflect that kind of assignment. But mine actually turned out well. So I'm going to read it. It's called Light Verse. And you know, of course, you guys all remember that, when Standard Time begins, it gets light earlier than you think it's going to, right? Not later. And it gets dark earlier. Just to make that clear, because, the poem doesn't work unless everybody understands that. Light verse. Standard Time begins. It's just 5, but it's light like 6. It's lighter than we think. Mind and day are out of sync. The dog is restless. The dog's owner is sleeping and dreaming of Elvis. The treetops should be dark purple, but they're pink. Here and now, the sun shakes off an hour. The sun assumes its pre-calendrical power. It is, though, only what we make it seem. Now in the dog owner's dream, the dog replaces Elvis and grows bigger than that big tower in Singapore, and keeps on growing until he arrives at a size with which only the planets can empathize. He sprints down the ecliptic's plain, chased by his owner, Jane. That's not really her name. Who yells at him to come back and synchronize. Thank you.
Vijay Seshadri, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Vijay. And thanks also to Nora and Ethan and to Anna Coit. For those of you who would like to take a little of Vijay Seshadri home tonight, we have his wonderful Pulitzer Prize-winning book, 3 sections. Also his regretting and betrodden books, The Longmeadow and The Woeful Wild Kingdom. They would love for you to take them home tonight, too. Don't forget that the Arts Café will return in October with Margaret Gibson. And remember, the Arts Café is a tribute to you. This is community, my friends. And doesn't it feel good? Thank you and good night.